Alright, so in the past few days, a speech kinda went viral. So it's a speech by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. His speech was about the great powers of the world, the strongest nations, superpowers, not respecting international law anymore. So now they seem to be living by the principle of might makes right. So they take what they want, even if it means breaking international laws. Now, one of the most recent examples that falls into that category is of course the United States trying to take over Greenland. Now, especially Europeans were absolutely furious and very disappointed because the United States is supposed to be an ally, but now it's trying to take land from Europe? That's not how allies behave. Now, of course, Europeans are well aware that if push really comes to shove, that Europe doesn't have a lot of leverage, certainly not militarily, which makes the situation very frustrating. Now, in his speech, Mark Carney kind of suggested that smaller nations like Canada and like the European nations should come together to form new alliances. And he also even hinted at the idea that trading with China should no longer be considered taboo. So these smaller nations should diversify to make themselves less vulnerable. Now, especially for many Europeans, this kind of felt like a relief. Finally, someone who seems to have his heart in the right place and who has some really good ideas on how to combat the uncertainty that comes from Donald Trump's unhinged behavior. That's been the sentiment of many people, especially in Europe, after hearing that speech. Now, to be honest, when I heard the speech, at first, I also was pretty impressed. The thought even crossed my mind that this could actually be the beginning of something good. Some kind of awakening, maybe, and a departure from the often very controversial, or some may even say evil behavior of Western nations and empires throughout history. But very soon after, I thought to myself, who is this guy? And who is he actually really talking to? I mean, he gave his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos in Switzerland. Now, to put it very mildly, the World Economic Forum has a highly controversial reputation. I mean, it's clearly a completely undemocratic gathering of some of the wealthiest people on the planet who then discuss the financial and economic future of the world. Now, the decisions that they make usually have enormous consequences for everyone. And the World Economic Forum also has quite the reputation of promoting policies that always seem to somehow transfer wealth from the poorest to the wealthiest people on the planet. Mark Carney himself very much seems to also be a member of that global elite group. I mean, he worked for Goldman Sachs for 13 years. Now, of course, Goldman Sachs also has a very questionable reputation. They've been linked to several huge scandals, one of which, of course, being the 2008 worldwide financial crisis. Now, he's also been the governor of the Bank of Canada. And by the way, what's very interesting is that he's often praised for anticipating the 2008 financial crisis as the governor of the Bank of Canada. And with that, he helped Canada to avoid the worst impacts of the crisis. So think about it. Goldman Sachs is widely considered one of the major contributors to the 2008 financial crisis. Mark Carney has worked for Goldman Sachs for 13 years. Then he becomes the governor of the Bank of Canada, and then he anticipates the 2008 financial crisis. Now, could there be some kind of connection there? I don't know. Anyway, Mark Carney has also been the governor of the Bank of England, and he's also attended several annual meetings of the Bilderberg Group, and he's also a member of the foundation board of the World Economic Forum, just to name a few of his past activities. So again, it very much seems like he's definitely a member of that elite billionaires club, which isn't exactly known for spreading the wealth and looking out for ordinary folks like you and me. And if that is so, then what is really going on here? What's the real reason that he gave that speech? And why is he speaking up now? I mean, he seemed fine with Israel and the United States bombing Iran some months ago. Just like most other Western nations, by the way. They all seemed completely okay with an apparent genocide being carried out in Gaza. I didn't hear anything when the US started bombing Nigeria and Somalia, and they seemed perfectly fine with the US bombing Venezuela and kidnapping a democratically elected president of a sovereign country. But only now, when it's their own interests that are apparently being threatened, those of Canada and those of other Western nations, now Mark Carney decides to speak up and act like he's the savior of the world. So, what do you believe is really going on here? Is it A, Mark Carney is a good man. He's always had the best of intentions for the Canadian people and basically for everyone around the world. But now, all of a sudden, he realizes that the world has become unfair because the superpowers of the world are breaking international laws whenever they want. And so he's calling on the smaller nations to unite because together they can also be strong. Or B, the world has always been unfair. Western nations, including Canada, have always violated international law, and they've all hugely benefited from this. Only now that it's Canada's rights that are being cornered, now all of a sudden Mark Carney speaks up and presents himself as a hero. Or C, Mark Carney is gaslighting. He represents the billionaire class, and with his speech he's been trying to stir up some sentiments that can then be used to manipulate people and make them move in a certain direction. For example, division of labor regarding Ukraine. The United States needs other NATO members to take over the Ukraine war so that the US can move on and focus their attention on other parts of the world, meaning China. Now, for that to happen, European countries as well as Canada need to increase their defense spending by a lot. Now, the willingness amongst Europeans to pay even more for defense and then to also support their respective countries to start directly fighting Russia, unsurprisingly, is not very high. Now, what Mark Carney's speech may well have done is encourage the idea with ordinary citizens of Europe and Canada that their respective countries should be less dependent on the United States, especially for security. Now, this automatically means, or at least that is how it's being sold, that Europe as well as Canada should spend much more on defense. So this speech may well have increased the willingness amongst European as well as Canadian citizens to spend more of their money on their military. And by the way, who knows? I mean, Donald Trump saying that he wants Greenland and is even willing to use military force to get it. And then European leaders getting extremely angry and then sending an almost embarrassingly small group of military personnel to Greenland to do what exactly? To intimidate the United States? And then the so-called negotiations between the US and NATO. I mean, NATO is nothing without the US. NATO ultimately is a US organization disguised as an international alliance. So how can the US and NATO be fighting each other? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But anyway, complete chaos about Greenland. And then all of a sudden, perfectly timed, there is that amazing speech by Mark Carney. Who knows? This all may very well have been a coordinated gaslighting campaign by the billionaire class. Or D, let me know what you think.